when we get started in a couple of minutes here, I'm just going to do an introduction. Do one of you want to go first?
I am fine with whatever.
Okay.
Just
Well,
play it
you'll
by
have
ear,
to
I guess.
speak, Daniel, you'll have to speak slowly in the first little bit so we get what you're asking.
I was thinking, yes, yeah.
We did the second rehearsal. He was going so fast I couldn't listen as fast as he was talking.
What did you say to me the other day, Bill? I was telling you that I record myself sometimes when I'm doing research for the books, and you were like, "How do you understand the accent, though?"
Your own accent, yeah.
Master of the quick.
Yeah.
I see foreigners there from way up in English. And Barry, I guess that's, I know you, and hi, Marilyn. Stuart McDonald, my goodness, he's a survivor last month.
Yeah.
Good. There he is. Hi, Stuart. Yeah, he still hasn't dusted his guitars, I see.
Yeah.
All right, Tara, do you want to lead the way, and then we'll take it from there?
Sure. I will just say a very quick hello to everyone. Oh, there's someone looking to come in, so I'll let, just a welcome to everyone. My name's Tara McNeil, and I work for the Cape Breton Regional Library. I work out of the Sydney Library branch, and I've gotten to know Bill quite well since he's been our storyteller in residence. And the storyteller in residence program has been happening. We've had the official program for about 10 years, and Bill has been our storyteller in residence for 2 years. And he's been wonderful. He moves with what we need. He goes to all the branches. And then when we closed down because of COVID, he was very quick to think about, well, you know what, let's try this Zoom thing I hear about. And he's been connecting us via Zoom all fall, and this is the 5th session, so we're in great hands. I've thoroughly enjoyed all the sessions that I've watched. I've been entertained. I've learned things. There's been wise counsel and talks about neighbors and communities and friends and childhood memories. So I hope to hear whatever's on offer tonight. I think I will also just quickly say too, our library branches are open. We've been open since July, but we're unable to do all of the things we've done before. So feel free to connect with us again, find us online, and lots of things happening on our webpage, cbrl.ca, including recordings of previous New Moon stories. So I think I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, you might have to email me. But I'll leave it in your host's hands, Bill Conall.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. When we're on this view, Tara, I get to talk and I see how you respond. And I might just go back to gallery here and see what's going on. Here I am. Yeah.
Okay.
We're having fun telling stories. This is the 5th edition of New Moon Stories, and if it keeps going, I'm going to have to find some new material. Just in case somebody watches all the replays, you know, he's only got 2 stories and he tells them over and over. But I'm pleased tonight to be joined by my neighbor down the road here, Charlie MacEachern. I heard a nickname for you last night, Charlie. I'll talk to you about it privately later. And our other Chatter MacEachern, is that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
And
the other fella that's with us tonight is Daniel Mcguire, and he came to this country somehow and got snared by a Canadian girl, and here he is. And, so
hey, thank you.
Snared is a good word, is it? Well,
I didn't catch that. The signal is not great.
Oh, the signal's not good. Yeah, I'm getting older, and my signal's not as strong as it used to be. I said you came to Canada and saw a girl and got snared.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That'd
yeah.
be-
No, I left Ireland. I left Ireland the same reason every Irish man leaves his mother for another woman.
If you want to carry on, Daniel, we've asked you to go slow in the first round so we can get used to the accent, or you can get used to our accents.
I don't do slow. I used to be a tour guide in Dublin once, and I had a speech therapist on my tour, and she said it should be physically impossible to talk the way you do. She said, like, you're not breathing when you talk, and I like still to this day, like it's a mystery. It's apparently speech therapists around the world are shocked at the speed at which I could talk. But yeah, I could take it off if you want, Bill, or
Sure. Hi.
There he is.
it's so frozen. Did you one of you want Charlie or Bill want to take it off so I can maybe figure out my Wi-Fi situation here?
Well, I will kick it off by handing it over to Charlie. Take it away, Charlie.
Okay, I'll try. I guess I'll talk about the bridges that were built in the area during the making of the Cabot Trail. There was a long bridge in North River and another one at Indian Brook, and there were signs posted on those bridges was that if you had a horse and wagon, you had to walk your horse across the bridge for safety reasons. Apparently, they didn't trust their structure, maybe. But they went on to, transport cars and stuff. So that was one of the restrictions on there. And when you were underneath the bridge, if a dog ran across it, the whole bridge rattled.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, they did. And the old Cabot Trail went in through Tarvidvale, went across the bridge to Tarvidvale, and came down by the telephone office in building at Indian Brook. That was part of the old road, the old Cabot Trail. And on that part of going through from Tarvidvale to Indian Brook, there was an avalanche, and there was a guy died in it from Ingonish. Snow slide. Yeah. And there was up on this side of the Barriswell Bridge, they were working on the highway there, and this horse and wagon came along and there was a lady in it, and they were working on the road, and something startled the horse, and the horse backed up, and the wheel dropped over the side of the bank, and she fell out of the wagon and went down over the bank and was killed.
Boy.
Yeah. And then in Recco, where the South Silo was at, they were the first car that went through on the Cabot Trail, I've been told. Just when it went past that, it went in around like a cove, and it went off the road, and the owner was killed. And apparently it was from North Sydney or Sydney Mine somewhere, but it was the very first car supposedly that went through on the Cabot Trail. Yeah.
When was that?
Pardon?
When was that?
Oh, it'd be in the early, around the first cars, I guess.
Yes, okay.
So it'd be maybe in the 20s or
Yeah.
early 30s. Yeah, but it's down in Redcoat, just not far from the foot of Smoky.
Mm-hmm.
And when where the old South Silo was at, if you look, and this time in the fall when the leaves are gone, you can see it's all made with like flat stones, like the wall that holds the road up, and it was in there that it happened. Yeah.
I remember those salt silos, Charlie. There were two of them, weren't there, side by side?
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
they'd be what, 15 or 18 feet square and
anyway, yeah,
20 feet high.
Yeah,
I heard about a fella, and they put coarse salt in it to put on the trucks to sand and salt the roads. And the fella was in on top of the salt, and he started to sink through, and I guess he would have suffocated.
He almost met it. Yeah. He almost met the Waterloo there.
You mentioned North River Bridge too. We talked to Duncan McEachern, Stuart and I, years ago, and he told us about when he was a boy, when they put that bridge in, he used to swing hand over hand underneath it across the North River.
Oh yeah, I never went right across. I went.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, are you back now, boy?
Yeah, I think I'm good. I think my signal's back in touch. I'm not breaking up. Um, I love hearing Bill and Charlie tell stories, and I love the tradition of like Cape Breton storytelling. But I just feel like I should give everybody a heads up that I come from a completely different background. I was a stand-up comedian for 5 years. So whenever I tell a story, it's usually at my own expense. Um, so while I was a stand-up comedian, I was actually a walking tour guide in Dublin for about 5 years as well. And I used to give these big 3 hour historical tours of the city. And I was fairly decent at it because on an average day, I'd have between about 40 and 50 people. And that's about as many I had on this particular day. And so I'm standing in this little area called Temple Bar in Dublin, and I'm standing in front of this huge chart of the an astrology chart behind me, and I'm talking about the Vikings and how great the Vikings were at charting using star maps, and how great they were at navigation, and how important the Vikings were to the early settlements that made up Dublin, and how you can still see that today. So I'm in the middle of this spiel, and all of a sudden, from way up in the heavens, a pigeon lets one go, right? And this piece of pigeon shit sails down through the clouds and lands directly in the middle of my head. Right now, I have a little bit of a longer hairdo at this point, so I'm standing there and I can feel the bird shit working its way down through the curls onto the top of my head. Now, one thing you might know about me is I'm very professional. Um, so most people might have acknowledged it, but I did not skip a beat. I didn't even move a single muscle in my face, and I launched into the next part of the sentence and acted as if nothing had happened. And I looked out at the 40 or so people, and none of them seemed to notice either. But I'm sure they looked at me and thought, did a pigeon just shit on his head? And then when I didn't move, they thought, like, there's no way. Nobody is that committed to a job. Like he would have acknowledged it. So I kept going, and I finished up the spiel and blah blah blah. And then I'm like, okay, guys, we're gonna meet back here in 30 minutes. Loads of lovely for lunch. I'll see you later. So I take off down the street, and I'm in that very like particular blend of walking and running that people panicking usually do. But I'm also trying to keep my neck and head perfectly still, so as not to make any of the bird shit leak down the side of my head onto my clothes, because that would be embarrassing, right? So I get down the street and I make it into the nearest pub, is a little place called the Turk's Head. I storm through the door of the pub. I don't even pretend like I'm going to buy anything. Straight by the bartender, up to the bathroom. Now, one thing, if you've ever been to Europe, you might notice that sinks in Europe are quite a bit smaller than the big Goliath things you've got here in Canada. And so I get my head into this sink and I'm trying to wash the bird shit out of my hair. And I'm in the process of doing this. It's going fairly well. And all of a sudden, I feel this tightness in my head. And I realize that I have managed to wedge my head in the sink. And my head is now stuck between the tap and the bottom of the sink. The tap is still on, by the way. So the water is still just flowing. It's gushing outside of my head. And I'm like, how am I going to get out of here? And the water everywhere. And next minute I slip. And then now I'm completely KO'd, neck over the side of the sink, head stuck in the sink, feet on the floor. And I think this is it. This is how I go. This is how I die. This is going to be on every newspaper in the Greater Dublin area tomorrow morning. People are not going to know what's happened. They'll think it's a murder because there's no way that this is an accident. This is just too bizarre to be an accident, right? So, but eventually I do manage to get my feet back under me once again. And I return to the tour, completely soaked head to toe in water, face white as a sheet because I just nearly died. And I just go on as if nothing has happened because I'm a professional. So yeah, that's one of my stories, one of a few that involve a near-death experience. So yeah, there you go.
Lovely. Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think there's any moral in that or a piece of wisdom or like I don't like that's just unfortunate.
Well, you give us a little time, we'll find a moral in it.
Yeah. Get
Maybe
bigger
not right
sinks.
away. I'll say to anyone who's watching on the side here, if you'd like to raise your hand and offer us a story, we'd be glad to hear from you. At the bottom of your screen, you'll find the little chat button, and you can just send a little note to Tara at CBRL, and she'll be glad to let you in. So Well, Mr. McEachern, I'm just going to be like the tennis judge here, you know, refereeing back and forth. You got something else on your plate there, boy?
Well, I don't know. It's trying to think of something here. I was listening to all the other stuff going on here. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I got my first bicycle picking up beer bottles on the side of the road.
Oh.
And so, yeah, I think it was around, I don't know, 5 cents a dozen or something.
Wow.
And it came from Sears on the Aspie to Britain Cove and down the North Shore there. And I think it was something like $28 for a new
Wow.
bicycle. Yeah.
$28. That's 560 dozen beer bottles, Charlie.
You've got a good calculator.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, built in there.
Good luck getting a bicycle pump for $28. Jeez.
Yeah, and it was J.C. Higgins.
You mentioned the Aspie, and people may not know this, but there were no roads in Cape Breton until well into the 30s, I guess. And the only way to get
Yeah.
service in the communities around the shore was a steamship called the Aspie, who sailed out of North Sydney, was it? Or Sydney?
It came from Sydney.
Came from Sydney, and it would
Came
stop
from
at every
Sydney.
little port along the shore. And it would take passengers back and forth and bring in whatever needed to be bring in and take out what was taken out.
Well, that Aspie used to come, it used to go to Big Badore, and then it used to come up into St. Anne's Bay, right below Catherine Carr lives there. There was a wharf below there. There's the Aspie wharf. Used to go in and dock there and unload freight. And it kept on down, went right through to, I don't know, maybe Dingwall, you know, stopping all along the coast wherever there was freight to be dropped off or picked up. And it also picked up passengers, and that's how they went back and forth to Sydney, get supplies and stuff, because of the road. That's why they had the Aspie, I guess, was that's the only way of transportation. Anyway, one little story comes to mind. There was a guy, he worked over in Sydney, and they lived on the Oregon Road. So anyway, he had a great big car, and anyway, this fellow went over to him and asked him, he said, could I get a drive back to Sydney with you? He said, on Monday. No, he said, you can't. He said, the Aspie is coming Monday, you get a ride back on that. Okay, good enough. So that was the end of that trip to Sydney. And then a week or so later, Buddy had got himself a car and met up with the same guy again, but this time he was stuck on the road. And he asked the guy, he said, would you have a jack aboard your car? Yes, he said, I do. Well, could I use it? No, he said, you can't, but you can call the Aspie, they'll bring it over to you Tuesday. Okay.
I'll do a short one here. This is you're picking on Daniel tonight. Daniel, I'll pick on me for a bit. There's a period in the time of families when it's not uncommon to walk in the kitchen and see the refrigerator door open and the back end of a teenager sticking out of it, rooting around for something to eat. You know, you might as well take the door off the fridge for those years.
Yeah.
When I was a young teenager, this is not like long hair and bell bottoms. This is a teenager with a brush cut and a white t-shirt with the player's playing package tucked up in the sleeve, right?
Oh, there up in the sleeve.
Yes. I came home one day and my dad was at work, and I beat my brother home, and I don't know where my mother was, but I opened the fridge door. She'd been cooking, and she made chocolate pudding. We had those little glass, they were about a cup size, I guess, and they were glass with a little stem on them, you know, fancies for us. And she'd made a dozen chocolate puddings. So I thought, whoa, I'm having one of those. And I did. And then I had another one. And then I kept going, and I ate every single one of them. And then I happened to bend over and I saw back in the corner of the shelf, there's one more back there. So I said, yum, yum. And I grabbed that too and dug my spoon in and took a big mouthful and spit it all over the fridge. I'll tell you, there are some visual similarities between these things, but there's a definite taste difference between chocolate pudding and cold roast beef gravy.
Oh, oh dear Lord. Oh my God. Oh.
I wonder if your mom was testing you.
Yeah, it's a good trap. I like it.
Not near as much as I tested her.
No, yes, okay.
Yeah.
I should say too, someone in the chat room was sharing. So Stuart said that he hears it's good luck to have a bird poop on your head. Just so you know, Daniel.
Yeah, people have said that. It's clearly people who have never been shot on by a bird. On the subject of me being difficult to understand, as Bill might have alluded to before, the first job I ever got when I moved to Cape Breton, I was working in the Celtic Lodge up in Ingonish, and I've worked reception. I've been in tourism my whole life, and I was working front desk one day, and this group of people came in, sat down. I started checking them in. I gave them the whole spiel, and the whole time they're just sort of sitting there nodding, smiling. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I give them their keys, tell them where their room is. And at the Celtic Lodge, customer service is a big thing. So we always make sure that we call everybody who checks into their room about 10 to 15 minutes after they've checked in, just to make sure everything's okay and all is well. So I called this room up, and there's about 3 or 4 people in the room. And the guy's on the phone. He's like, yeah. And I can hear these other people speaking really loudly in the room. And they turn to each other and they go, did you understand a word he said? and the other guy goes, no, I couldn't understand anything. And then one of them goes, I think he was speaking Gaelic.
The Cabot Trail, I think, through this area and down the North Shore, I think it was around 1950 that was, late 48, 49, that road was constructed. And it was maybe in the 60s it was paved for the first time. In that area, I'd say maybe 62. I could be wrong on them numbers, but it was in that time frames. And so that changed a lot of in the spring here, they had corduroyed the road because there was a lot of swamps where the road went through and you were stuck in them. So anyway, that was the beginning of the Cabot Trail.
So the corduroy road, that's with logs, isn't it? That's
And up
logs
for your
laid
driveway
sidewalk?
is where there was a lot of it, right in that area. Yeah, right along that area and on the West Turbid Road out back of Carl Potty's there on that flat out towards Ruth and Aaron's there. It was soft and it had a corduroy with trees.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, if you got in there, you were stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I ruminate sometimes on the difference between living out here in the sticks and living in the city. And the example I think of is I had a friend in Toronto who was going across the 401. If you haven't been there, 401 is about 6 lanes in each direction, and it's always busy. And this particular day, she hit a patch of ice and spun around and ended up against the center guardrail facing towards the oncoming traffic. And she was there for 2 hours before an off-duty fireman pulled up and put his flasher on and stopped the traffic so she could turn around.
Oh.
By contrast, Rosemary, we live in Tarbert, and she was working in Bedeck at the time, and she went in the winter one day and caught an ice patch and went nose first into the ditch. And she wasn't hurt, and there wasn't much damage, but every vehicle that came by stopped. Every single one said, "Are you okay? Would you like a ride to Bedeck? Would you like a ride back home? Can I call somebody for you?" That includes the garbage truck and the school bus. And for me, man, that's the difference between living in a small community and living in the city, because there are no strangers here. If you see somebody on the road, it's a friend or a neighbor or a visitor, and they all deserve courtesy. So that's one of the things I like about being here.
I had the same experience the first year I moved into Bedeck. Courtney and I were emptying out somewhere, and we wanted to do a dump run. And so we went up to the dump, drove into the dump, and we went out to the big metal pile at the back of the dump. But there must have been something on, or it must have been staff party, because we came in at like 10 to 5 or 10 to 6, just before closing. And when by the time we made it out of the dump, everyone had left. They had all gone home and the gate was locked. And so Courtney and I were locked inside the dump and we couldn't get the car out of the Bedeck dump. So the two of us, it was just a short trip. So we didn't bring our phones. We didn't bring jackets. Like, we had nothing with us, like no way of getting help or whatever. So we started walking down the street back towards Bedeck. And then like this person drove by in a truck and they like got us to jump in the back. They were coming back from fishing and they hadn't even made it into the village of Bedeck. They had like made it just across the bridge, pulled into someone's garden, started yelling at someone from the garden, who then got on their phone and called like 2 or 3 other people. And then in 5 minutes time, we were back at the dump and the dump was open and we were out of there. And like, it's just like unheard of, like living in Dublin City. And even the town I live in is a small town because there's thousands of people, right? And so, yeah, that was a real eye opener, like how quickly you can get stuff done in Bedeck, like just from a couple of phone calls and the degrees of separation, right? I do enjoy that about life out here and to a certain degree.
Lovely. Did you get a nibble from a contributor, Tara?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Art shared a little driving Smokey story that his grandfather shared, and I'm not sure if he's going to tell it or if he just wants me. I might just open Art and Kathy's video up, if that's all right, and see if he wants to share that.
I'll let Kathy
Tell?
start. This is actually her grandfather.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Kathy, it's all yours.
My grandfather told the story. Well, it was my grandmother who told the story because she never told it when my grandfather was around. But I guess they had gone to Ingonish, and when on the way back, something happened with transmission of the car and they couldn't get it to go forward. So now Smokey would have been a dirt road at that time, and he had to back down Smokey.
Oh.
Car. Can you imagine?
No.
Which is why
I know I'd probably have left the car.
father
Now,
was around.
I've got another Smokey story. Every year we've been doing a fundraiser bicycle ride around the trail. And I do the riding. Kathy rides a support vehicle. She's the food and beverage lady, and nobody will let her pick up the bicycle because then we'd be without food and beverage. And she does a great job. As an aside, the best piece of watermelon you'll ever have is after you climb North Mountain on a bicycle and she's cutting the fresh watermelon. But about 5 years ago, we were at the top of Smokey and we gather after coming up from Ingonish. So we're going down the steep side. And
On a bicycle. Just think about
and normally
that.
we all go down at our own pace, which is kind of crazy at times. But this one, now you know why it was smoky, only it was fog. A guy had a yellow jacket on. He was 30 feet away, totally disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So we're at the top and we figured, how are we going to do this? So there's 14 riders. We figure we've got several support vehicles. One of them is a big SUV and the guy knows the road. So he says, let all the riders go down in a bunch and I'll follow directly behind you,
Okay.
just to protect. And now,
I'll take it from
so away we go. And as an aside, when we got to the bottom, he said a car did get by the top and tried to pass him. He had going down Smokey, so he
it
took
was
the middle of the road.
pea soup fog, right?
Now we'll take over. Now
It was pea soup fog. Okay. And so anyway, so they went down with the big SUV. And the next vehicle that picked up was one of these huge RVs. Like the thing was just massive. It had Alberta plates. And and let's just say you knew the guy who was driving it didn't come from Ingonish. And I thought he has absolutely no idea what's going on. So I stepped out in the middle of the road with a blanket. And I flagged him down, and he couldn't understand a word I was saying. So I pulled him off the road, and the next guy had plates from somewhere else. I pulled like a half a dozen cars off the road because I didn't think they were fit to go down. All right, and still someone got by it. But the funniest part of it is that I continually embarrass my husband, all right? He never knows what I'm going to say or do.
So the next stop is the Clucking Hen for lunch. Everybody knows where the Clucking Hen is. So I pull in there, and one of the other wives who was a sport vehicle, she's already in. She was driving. She said, "Oh, Art, come on over. You would not believe what your wife did." And I'm saying, "Oh my God." What did she do this time? But she said, I wish I had the guts. She had stopped this string of traffic because technically, if the guy with the RV had gone down in the fog, he could have run the whole group of us over, and we would have been all spots on
Yes.
like flies on his vehicle.
Mm.
So she's my hero.
Yes.
So another Smokey, the Cabot Trail stories.
There you go. Yes, that's right. Nice.
All right. Thanks very much for that. Lovely. No shortage of stories, eh?
Yeah.
Smokey is a weird one. I remember, like, when I used to commute to the Celtic Lodge, I remember I used to see people drive down Smokey and they used to straddle both lanes,
Right.
like coming down towards you. And I remember saying to one guy, I said, "That's so stupid. I can't believe people straddle the lanes." And one guy turned around to me and said, "Oh, I have to straddle the lanes." He says, "When I come down that hill, I have to straddle the lanes. Otherwise, my kids get car sick."
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, talk about priorities.
Hmm. If,
You know,
I
talk
think
about-
everybody here knows Smokey, but if you don't, it's the twisty turny thing that you see on all the tourist brochures, and it goes from sea level to about 325 meters in the space of maybe 3 kilometers. Lots of hairpin turns, and it can be a bit tense going either way. Anyway, Charlie, take her away, boy. Again, I picked up an Irish accent somehow.
Contagious.
When they had the fire in Wreck Cove back in the 60s, I guess it was 67 or so, it started out back where the Wreck Cove project is, and they were fighting it there for several days. And there was people that lived right at the bottom of Smokey, where that brook that you go across to start up Smokey, and they lived right at the very bottom of at the ocean where and that's where the house was. And the guy came out of the house and he looked and he could see like fire on top of the mountain above him, across the highway from the Cabot Trail there. So he took him and the dog and they went to the shore. They tried to put a rowboat out to get off the land. And before they got that done, the dory was on fire and they had to run and go underneath the cliff, him and the dog, and he took his jacket and soaked it in the ocean and put that over him and the dog, and the horse died in the field. That was a close call. That's how fast it came, because they had to go no distance to get from where they were to the shore. So fire can move quick.
This is a psychological trick. I'm just waiting to see who speaks next.
The next can stand off.
I think we passed.
Oh no, we're not standing off by any means. We're good to go here. I have a story. I heard this one first, also in my teenage years, and I heard it on the radio. And it was an English fella reading a letter. I think it was called The Sick Note. Does that ring any bells for anybody yet?
Yeah.
Okay, well, hold on. Here we go. And that was probably around 1960, I guess, and there was no internet or, the tape recorders were reel to reel. So I heard it once and it disappeared. And the next time I heard it was probably 20 years later. I was living in Saskatoon, and my friend Patty Tuddy did this story, but she did it as a song. And I'm sure she told us the provenance of it and who wrote it and everything else, because she was good at that. But once again, I didn't retain any of it, and it disappeared until when I was anointed storyteller in residence. I thought, I'll bet you that'd be a good one to find out, to have in the quiver. So I consulted an academic friend of mine, Professor Google, and we went on the hunt, and we found out that we found the song, and it was written by an Irishman named Pat Cooksey in 1967. And he said in his notes, I wrote the song, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with an address to the Oxford Students' Union by Gunther Horning in 1958. All right, but the professor and I are both curious, so we had a look at Mr. Horning, and we found out that that was the guy I'd heard the first time reading the letter called a sick note. But Pat Cooksy's song was called, he said it's been recorded hundreds of times in different languages and different titles, but the story is always the same. And he recorded it as Why Paddy's Not at Work Today. Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and Cooksey said he had nothing to do with Horning, but the story is identical, and in some places even the language is the same. But if an Irishman tells you it's true, then obviously it's true, right? So
You got to be Irish.
I will offer the musical version of this. Dear sir, I write this letter to inform you of my plight. And at the time of writing, I am not a pretty sight. My body is all black and blue, my face a deathly gray. And I write this note to say why Paddy's not at work today. While working on the 14th floor, some bricks I had to clear. To throw them down from such a height was not a good idea. The foreman wouldn't hear of it, he was an awkward sod. He said I had to cart them down the ladder in me hod. Well, moving all those bricks by hand, it was so very slow. So I hoisted up a barrel and I tied it off below. In my haste to do the job, I was too blind to see that a barrel full of building bricks was heavier than me. And so when I untied the rope, the barrel fell like lead. And clinging tightly to the rope, I started up instead. I took off like a rocket till to my dismay I found halfway up I met the bloody barrel coming down. Well, the barrel broke my collarbone as to the ground it sped. When I reached the top, I banged the pulley with my head. Hung on tightly, numb with shock from that almighty blow. And the barrel spilled out half its bricks, 14 floors below. When the bricks had fallen from the barrel to the floor, I then outweighed the barrel, so I started down once more. Clinging tightly to the rope, my body racked with pain. Halfway down, I met the bloody barrel once again. The force of this collision halfway up the office block caused multiple abrasions and a nasty case of shock. Clinging tightly to the rope, I fell down to the ground and landed on the broken bricks the barrel scattered round. I lay there groaning on the ground, I thought I'd passed the worst. But the barrel hit the pulley wheel and then the bottom burst. A shower of bricks rained down on me, I hadn't got a hope. As I lay there bleeding on the ground, I let go the bloody rope. The barrel being now heavier, it started down once more and landed right across me as I lay there on the floor. It broke 3 ribs in my left arm, and I can only say, I hope you understand why Paddy's not at work today.
Did he ever get back after that trip?
Yeah. Hope we got more than
I
a
think he probably had a couple of weeks of compensation.
You're after reminding me of something, and I don't know if I'm jumping the queue here with this one, but I don't know if anybody's ever heard of a famous Irish author called Brendan Behan, have they?
Aye.
Yes.
So Brendan Behan was a bit of a rogue and a master wit, and also, unfortunately enough, a raging alcoholic. And this particular point in Brendan Behan's life, he had actually been sober for quite a bit. And he had received an invitation to go and speak in London at a university. And so he goes over to London, and he's actually really proud of himself and his sobriety. And so what he does is, before he goes to do the lecture, he actually goes and he gets himself a lovely suit, but it's a rental, but it's a beautiful suit. And he gets the rental suit and he goes to do his speaking engagement. And that night, he plans to attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And he goes to attend the meeting, but isn't the meeting next door to a pub. And so instead of going to the meeting, he goes into the pub and he gets absolutely bladdered. And he wakes up the next morning and he's totally out of it. He's after getting sick all over himself. The new suit that he's rented is covered in his own vomit, and he's deeply ashamed of this. And so he gets on the boat, he heads back to Ireland, and he's so ashamed and so tore up over the whole thing and his fall off the wagon that he takes the suit and he takes it into his back garden in his small house in Dublin, and he buries the suit in the back garden, right? So he buries it, he's ashamed of it, sticks it in the back garden. And then eventually, a couple of months later, he is back on the sauce again and he's drinking once again. And he receives a series of letters from a tailor's in London demanding the return of the suit. And unfortunately enough for the tailors, he has had a bit too much to drink at this point. And so what he does is he goes out into the back garden, digs up the suit, takes the suit, puts it in a box, gift wraps the suit, puts a ribbon around it, and posts it back to London. Yeah, terrible, like absolute genius of wit, brilliant stories, but kind of a tragic man at the same breath. But yeah, phenomenal.
I think my brother bought that suit secondhand.
Yeah, strange man.
Where you go, Charlie? This is nice. You just push Charlie's button, he comes up with a story. It's lovely.
I was just thinking about that song you sang about the barrel with the bricks.
That was great.
Well, there was a guy watching television this day, and there was a show on about cutting trees out in BC. And they would climb the tree, that put a strap around the tree, and then they'd cut the top off, and it would fall to the ground. So he was kind of intrigued with this operation, and he thought he'd try it. So he got his power saw and away he went, and he climbed up this tree, power saw and all, had a rope and tied it around the tree and tied it around himself, and proceeded to cut the top off the tree, which he did, but the rope was tied to the top.
Oh, no.
So he came out of the tree in a hurry.
Oh, no.
Gravity was turned on, I suppose, was it?
Yeah.
Just photocopy Patty's note and
There's there's stories that sometimes you don't remember them, but they come to you sometimes at the darndest times in the middle of the night. You keep laughing at them. Yeah. Yeah.
I see Wendy Smith down on the bottom here. I was going to tell a little of the story that she told us. One of my ideas one time was to have a bunch of tourist operators come on and tell stories about their experiences with the visitors. And the first thing that came to mind was one that Wendy told us. So if she can, if she'll take the bait, she's welcome to do it. I grew up, I came from Southern Ontario, and we used to hear stories from the tourist operators along the St. Lawrence. You know, they run the Thousand Islands tours, and we'd have people coming up from the great USA in July with skis on top of their car, and you know, pull off at Gananoque and say, "We want to go to Calgary for lunch. Can we do that?" Sure. It's 2,200 miles. You might not make it for the next serving. So, I hope Wendy would sign on, but she hasn't yet. So we'll just pass on with that.
there is Wendy Smith is here.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. But you wished that she'd say something. Yes, I see.
Yeah. Well, we dangled the invitation. No, maybe not. Okay, we'll get her the next time, or when she's not here, I'll quote her.
While we're sitting here, I remembered a story about a guy who was cutting hay down by the highway, and this car came by, and American, and he stopped his car and asked the guy where was the Cabot Trail. Well, the fellow said, "The Cabot Trail's around your wheels." Oh, why? He said, "It's not much between you and a fool." No, he said, "Just a wire fence."
I got it.
I'll tell you one more story.
All right, Charlie.
This guy bought a car, and he had it for a spell, and the transmission went in it. So anyway, he took it back to the dealership. Let's get it fixed. And the guy at the dealership asked him, well, I said, what's wrong? Well, he said, the car won't go forward, but it'll back up. Oh, really? Yeah, he said, it'll back up, but it won't go forward. Well, where did you buy the car at? He said, I bought it in Ontario. Well, if reverse works, you can take it back there and get it fixed.
My.
Speaking of tourists, I once had a
So many
person
people
on-
here quick with a quip.
Yeah. Speaking of tourists, I once had a person. I was on a tour one day, and they turned around to me and they were like, "Daniel," they were like, "I was on the tour the other day, and I kept seeing all these brick walls, these stone walls out in the countryside." And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "What are those walls for?" And I was like, "Well, I was like, what are walls ever for? Like, they're usually for keeping something in or out of a certain area." "Oh, okay, yeah." "And why are they made of stone?" I don't know. Stone's it's a pretty good thing to make a wall out of. It's pretty good building material. All right, okay. "And where do they get the stones from? The bloody ground." I tell you, man, some tourists are special. They're a special breed.
Yeah.
One of the Thousand Islands people, I remember saying, the tourist said, "Now, what do you do with the islands in the winter?" "Oh, well, we pulled them up the river here to Kingston and anchored them there for the winter and put them back in the spring."
Put a tarp over them.
Yeah. You got a story, Tara?
No, no, I don't. I have been reading the comments, and there was a little bit. Stuart had said that he was in Ireland. He was kind of going back with Daniel a little bit, and I feel he said he was in the West Coast, County Clare,
Yeah.
doing some archaeology. And I did ask if he wanted to share a story, but I haven't heard if it's a whole story to tell.
Oh, I'd love to know what you were doing out there. That's probably that Norman.
Well, this is
territory,
Gaelic
I don't
country
know.
up here in what? I have a little story. This is this country was Mi'kmaq. It's still unceded territory, as I understand, but the Presbyterians came in 1820 with Reverend Norman MacLeod, and they settled down there where the Gaelic College is now. And Gaelic was the language of business and commerce and industry and schooling and everything. And I have a couple of little stories. Hanyal Moran Gaelic Akam. I don't have a lot of Gaelic. Akabakan. I guess Han scale back on Gaelic Agus on Birla. Okay, I have a little story in Gaelic and in English, and it's Scottish Gaelic, not Irish, which is different, I guess.
Damn.
Anyway, va three Karsten and Aldo and Bali on you for Frankic, for Americanic, I guess for Alapanic. So these three friends went to town one day. There was a Frenchman, an American, and a Scot. The day was hot and the road was long, so when they got to town, by the time they got to town, the great thirst was on them. So van an rad fat agus an lach came mar sin an uair haiad don valley va pag mór agat. Mar sin haiad don tai asta e hurtid don farfrita luck hashin a giri tri glanyan lan cow, four, glay four. So of course they went straight to the hotel and they said to the waiter, "We want 3 glasses of beer, cold beer, very cold." But when the beer came, there was a fly in each of the glasses. Kanur van Jokan Chian van Kulik on Skaklanya. Well, van Theramericanic, Dorst and Lankowel or an Uller they ordered Jokala. So the American poured the beer on the floor and he ordered another drink. But for Frankic, Gavin Coolanas at Lankowel, the Violia. The Frenchman took the fly out of the glass and he drank the beer. And for Alapanuck, Gavin Coolan Asalan Cow, by Kuri Askaun the Glania, he hurti Chiliga Donis Becker. And the Scotsman picked the fly out of the beer, held it over the glass and said, Spit it out, you little devil.
He wasn't going to waste the beer.
Stuart does have a story to share. Is now an
Oh, he
okay
does.
time? Yes. So Stuart, you're almost there. If you want to just unmute yourself, I think you'll be able to share.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
We can hear you
Yeah,
now.
Stuart.
Yeah, it's not a big story. Over 2017, I'll tell this story for Daniel. 2017, I went over to Ireland. I'm a remote sensing tech by trade, and in the world of archaeology, they call that geophysics. And I had an opportunity to go over and work on some prehistoric archaeology over there in the west of Ireland, and it was an amazing thing. My story doesn't take place in Ireland. It takes place at the Halifax airport. And I don't know if you guys remember the summer of 2017, something happened to our cell service, and it affected the whole security system for the different airports in Atlantic Canada, and it caused a huge amount of delays, which backed up my flight. And of course, all these poor Irish people that were in PEI and Nova Scotia for summer vacation, and really they wanted to get home. So with those delays, of course, there were all these connecting flights were backing up, and we ended up in this small little airplane, heading to St. John's, and I met up with this couple, and they were from the Midlands, Daniel, in Ireland, mid country or whatever, Midlands, I think he's called it. And so when we landed in St. John's, the St. John's airport was full of Irish people and Newfoundlanders, and the people I never heard Newfoundlanders, right? Never heard them talk. And so we played a game on, I kind of bet them to see if they could tell the difference between a Newfoundlander and an Irish person speaking. And I won. It was quite fun. They were blown away. They'd never heard that kind of thing. But it was neat being over there, I didn't find it that much of a different culture than from what I grew up in, especially like the little towns I was in, But I will say, like, as far as everybody was talking about Smoky earlier, driving those lanes in Ireland, I think, is a little bit more treacherous than coming down Smoky. They got big hedges.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Away from the roads. Yep. It's like,
The roads are rough.
yeah, they are rough. Anyway.
We don't have on Irish back roads, the speed limits aren't speed limits as much as they are challenges. Like, it's kind of like, I dare you to try and go 100 kilometers on this road. Like,
yeah,
I had a friend from the island of Mauritius, and his name was Joe. And when we were growing up, Joe was a little bit older than all of us. So Joe got his driver's license before any of us did. And so I remember the first time he got his driver's license and he got his car and he took us out, and we were driving around the back roads and we were having a great time. And then Joe turned around to us and goes, "My favorite thing about Ireland is these one-way roads. I love these one-way roads." And we all turned to him and went, "Joe, this isn't a one-way road." And then all of a sudden, this truck came down the other way towards him, and he almost lost it, and we nearly ended up in a ditch. Yeah, they're treacherous. They're not. I don't advise.
When I was in high school, one of our buddies was taking his pilot's license, and he rented a Cessna, and four of us went up in that little plane flying up over the Ottawa River. And it was noisy. You couldn't hear anybody, of course, and we're just gliding along in the river, and the mountains are looking slow below us, and all of a sudden he puts it into a dive, and goes down towards the river and comes up about 15 feet off the river and says, "There, now you can tell everybody you went 200 miles an hour in a Cessna." Hmm. And survived it.
Yeah.
Tara, I see Dwayne Smith has joined us. Whatever you do, don't unmute that fella.
I'll move over for him.
Oh, nice.
Tara, you were telling us about
Yeah.
that place out at Monroe's Point there.
Yeah.
Well, nobody was here when you told you. Just Daniel and I heard that one.
Oh, okay. About the Triplite Lake.
Yeah, the Triplite. Yeah.
Yeah, where they mine the what the heck was it? Triplite. It was Triplite that they mined out there, and they used it for a stabilizer in nitroglycerin, and they used it in medication, and they also used it to make insulation blocks, and they had dryers out there, and they dried it in the wintertime and bagged it, and then transported it into St. Anne's and Gooseco there. And now they had the railroad came in from the quarry where the gypsum was mined and came down below H.A. Carmichael's, which would be David and Alan's grandfather, I guess, or yeah, it'd be their grandfather. He had a schooner down there, and I don't know if they shipped it by out of there on that, or did they do it somewhere else. But they had, I think they had, supposedly I was looking at it there, they had a tender out for 500 cord of firewood to run the kilns for the winter to do that. And anyway, I don't know if they ever got the wood, but anyway, it closed up. The school that was built, that was closed, and the whole thing shut down in about 1901. Before my time, it was passed down to me. And the other, what the heck was it? There was two quarries. There was a big quarry and a little quarry, and they mined both of them at the same time. And a guy by the name of Malcolm Dean, I don't know if you must have heard of him. He lived in Tarbert here, just beyond where Bill Conall is at. They had the Tarbert Festival on his property back in, I don't know, what, 80s, I guess maybe it was, or 70s. And he worked out there, and he told me that he drove a horse and cart and took stone and dumped it in the lake out there. And that was his job. It was a 10-hour day. He walked all the way from Tarbert, all the way out to the quarry, and he worked for 10 hours, and then he walked back home, 10 cents an hour.
Oh,
That was his pay. And then when he came home, he had a whole bunch of sheep that had to be looked after, and he had cows and horses, and that was it. And when he finished, when the quarry ended, the lake that he was dumping the stone in was just a little puddle. And he said the last time he was out there, he said you'd never know there was a stone ever put in the lake. It had sunk and widened out. It was gypsum hole,
Wow.
plaster hole they call them.
oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you can, I don't know if you can get out there. Beverly Brett was out there this year. There's one house still standing there, out in the quarry.
That's out at Rear Monroe's, is it?
Looks like you
No, that's out at the quarry. You go out there by Angie McLeod and turn off and go out that way.
Yeah.
That brook there, that the bridge there in the turn at the in Gooseco. Okay, that river that came in from out there. I think it did. Yes, it did come from the quarry.
it looks like you've got Wendy there if you want to try and get her on the hook there for that story.
Yeah, she might take the bait. Wendy, are you going to tell us a little bit?
I'm sorry. I've been trying ever since you invited me to chat. I've had some, let's just say, technical difficulties instead of operator difficulties. Which story did I tell you, Bill? I always thought Susan Zettel would write a book because she used to walk with us every morning, and so Marion from the leather shop and Sarah from Wildfire Pottery and myself, we would walk every morning before the store opened. And we'd get our frustrations and we just empty our stories about customers. And some of them weren't meant to repeat, but we felt we were safe kind of airing them with her. Why, I don't know, because she's a writer, but she never wrote the book. So I think now I wish she had, because I forget most of the stories. So I'm not sure which one I told you, Bill. The customer stories.
You said there were two tourist stories that you remembered, and one of them involved a planetary body above the Earth.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
This would be probably 26 years ago when I first opened the shop. I had it in Goose Cove, and that's where Dwayne lives now. And I remember one day I had a couple customers, and they were from New York, and they were about my age. And one of them said, "Oh, last night, the moon was so gorgeous." And I said, "Well, you probably, have that gorgeous moon too." And she said, "No, dear, we live in New York." And and anyway, I forget how it went. Did I tell you? I can't remember how the ending was. And I just couldn't believe it. She said, no, dear, I live in New York. We don't have that same moon. I thought, okay, she didn't know that the moon was the same as the one we had. And I think the second customer story, it was much funnier when it happened. And I'm sorry, I'm not a very good storyteller, so I've messed it up. And I'm actually shocked that I'm on here.
The way you told it to me, Wendy, the way you told it to me was the customer was talking about the moon, and then she said, "Is that the same moon we have back home?"
Yes, that's how it went.
I don't know. Where do you live?
Yeah. Yeah, that was funny. And then the cruise ship, when I had the shop in Bedeck, the Heavenly Angels shop, we got a lot of cruise ships. And that was back in the day when I think everybody put their parents on a ship and let it sail to wherever it went. And most of the people on the ship had no idea where they were going or where they'd been. They just were on the ship traveling around. And I had this elderly customer come in one time, and she paid for her purchase, and I gave her the change. And she said, no, dear, I'm from America. I'm from the United States. I need the change in United States funds. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but you're in Canada, and this is the money that we use. And she said, well, where am I ever going to spend it? And I said, where do you go next? And she said, Newfoundland. And I said, I'm sure that they'll take it there for you. But anyway, there are some really cute stories. I just wish I could remember them all.
Oh, that was lovely.
Oh, dear. Well,
Okay.
thanks, Wendy, very much for
I'll
those.
say goodbye to everybody.
Cheers, Wendy. It's good seeing you.
You see how it goes, eh, lads? Well, Daniel, you got a grin on your face. What's behind it?
No, nothing much. I was just thinking, like, I was in South America for 3 months in 2015, and still to this day, the strangest thing I've ever seen is that when, speaking of the moon being the same place to place, for whatever reason, because you're, I guess, below the equator, when you look up at the moon, when you typically see like a half crescent, like a banana, when you're so far south, it actually looks like a Cheshire cat. It's like the other way around, right? It looks like a smile in the night sky. It's like super creepy, but like really kind of amazing at the same time. And that just popped into my head. And now I'm wondering, did I imagine it all? But yeah, the Cheshire cat moon is pretty cool.
You told a story in the Bedeck Library about your time in South America and a language incident there. Do you recall it?
Yeah. So
You don't have to,
I for whatever. Yeah, no, more than happy to. I, for whatever reason, thought it would be a great idea to go to South America for 3 months without a word of Spanish. So I arrived in South America, and after about 2 weeks of stumbling my way through the language, I was like, decided I was going to go off and take a language course. And I'll just give you a couple of examples about how bad being in South America was with no Spanish. I had like learned a couple of words, and there was this huge big market that was close to town, and I used to go to the market all the time. And I knew I knew how to bargain in Spanish, but I didn't know how to count in Spanish. So I knew how to say nada menos, which is nothing less. So when you go into a market, they go, this is how much it is. And you go, anything less? Like, can I pay any less? And so I knew how to say nada menos, but I couldn't count. So I would say, any less? Can I get it for cheaper? And they would tell me a price, and I would have no idea what they were saying. So I would just go, nada menos, until I had happened upon a number that I liked the sound of, right? So it was difficult having no Spanish. So I go off and I go off to the Spanish school out in the middle of nowhere in South America. And I begin learning Spanish, and I learned some basic things about how to introduce myself and tell people what age I am and stuff like this. One of the things that I didn't learn and didn't seem to realize was that in the Spanish language, there is a phonetic issue where in some ways, in some words, you see the letter N, and on top of the N, you see like a little accent. And when you see that accent, you know that that N sound is like an N and a Y. So for instance, the word years is años. And so I didn't realize this little accent. So I had gone around telling everybody I was 27 años, which means I was telling everybody I was 27 anuses old for about a month. So people are like, hi, I'm Daniel, I'm 27 anuses old, and I'm from Ireland. Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. Grammar is important.
Mr. McEachern, there was a mention of coyotes, I think, earlier on sometime. Did you want to draw that one out? You did this in one of our practice sessions. You told us about the coyotes.
You speaking to me?
I'm speaking to you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're our coyote expert.
Oh, I don't know. This when the coyotes first came around here, there was never ever coyotes, as far as I know, around here until they came, and they multiplied very quickly. And people had sheep and farm animals, and of course they needed something to eat. There was probably not enough rabbits and partridge and stuff to keep them alive, so they used to go into the farms and get if they could find a sheep or something that they could kill, that's what they do. And so the farmers were getting fed up; they were losing sheep. So there was a meeting scheduled, and there was a bunch assembled to talk about the coyote problem. Well, some of them had different ideas. They would do this with the coyote and whatever. Anyway, there was one person made a suggestion. What we should do is we should live trap them and then neuter them and put them back in the wild, and then they won't bother your sheep. Oh, fellas, I don't have a problem with them having sex with my sheep. It's eating them I have the problem. With that, I better leave.
No.
That was up Niels Harbor way, wasn't it, Charlie?
I'm not going to say where it was.
Remember, was that up around Niels Harbor somewhere?
No, it wasn't. No.
No? Okay.
No, it wasn't up there.
Well, whoever
Someday
told
I'll
me
tell
that
you. There's too many
relocated
people
to-
live and still know the guy, and he's after passing away. Yeah. I don't want to get in trouble with these
I have,
stories.
well, if you're not getting in a little bit of trouble, you're not taking a big enough bite.
I got enough. I got enough trouble over my life. I don't need any more.
Yeah. You're young yet, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
I think in every one of these so far, I've done a rhyming poem. I think, I think about rhyming poetry as a wonderful way to tell stories. And I was a fan of, A Cremation of Sam McGee and Casey at the Battle and all those wonderful epic poems. And I remember going to my old high school in Ontario one time, and I was doing a writing session with the English class. and I mentioned, what's his name? Yeah, that guy, Sam McGee. And nobody had ever heard of Robert Service. They hadn't even heard of him. And I looked at the teacher. I said, what about this? Oh, they wouldn't be interested. And I didn't shoot him, only because I left my gun in the car. But I may go back and do it sometime. Anyway, I took to writing epic poems just because they fell from the sky, so I wrote them down. And this is the first one. It's a short one. It's only 17 verses. I have one that goes 66 and probably over 300 lines. But this was my first foray into rhyming poetry. And it's the story of Pamela's perfect papaya. Pamela purchased a perfect papaya, which she placed on the table in her dining room. She carried it home on the 7th of April, and there it remained till the 19th of June. She really intended to have it for supper that evening in spring when she first brought it home. She was just getting ready to cut the thing open and savor the flavor when ring went the phone. It was old Mrs. Johnson, a friend of her mother's, in from Toronto, just here for the day. While Pamela caught up on all of the gossip, her kitty decided she wanted to play. She climbed on the chair by the dining room table, peeked over the edge just to see what was there. The first thing she saw was the perfect papaya, and she noted the bottom was rounded, not square. A delicate paw reached toward the papaya, intended to give it the gentlest tap, but the devil that lives inside each little kitty got carried away, and she gave it a whack. The papaya responded. It leapt across the table in a manner most unlike a tropical fruit. When it got to the end, it had no way of stopping, so over the edge it went. No parachute. And oh, through the lens of a slow-motion camera, its fall would have been a spectacular thing. End over, arse over tea kettle, a swan dive, a gainer, a backflip, a spring. At the end of the dive, though, was hardwood, not water. The landing was awful and painful to see. At the bottom, it squished down to half of its thickness and shook every molecule, atom, and seed. The force of the impact carried it forward. It rolled rather lumpily over the floor, passing the fern and the new magazine rack, and then under the Chesterfield next to the door. Pamela entered, her phone call completed, muttering softly and rubbing her ear. She sat down to taste the most perfect papaya, noticed it missing, and said, that's queer. I really don't think that I ate the papaya, although it's possible I could be wrong. I thought it was here when I first heard the phone ring, and now that I'm back again, there it is, gone. Perhaps I've been working too hard, she suggested. I guess I'll just have a banana instead. She ate the banana, patted her kitty, turned off the TV, and went up to bed. By morning, the incident all was forgotten. She went off to work in her usual way, while under the Chesterfield next to the doorway, the final remains of the victim still lay. Daily it softened, weekly it rotted. At the end of a fortnight, it started to smell. Pamela noticed the sickening odor, but where it was coming from, she couldn't tell. She washed all the curtains, vacuumed the carpets, did up the laundry and had a hot bath, took out the garbage, changed Kitty's litter, dusted the bookshelves and swept off the path. She waxed and she polished, she cleaned and she dusted, she panicked. She cried out, she cussed and she swore. She moved all the furniture, attic to basement, except for the Chesterfield next to the door. For it was too heavy and she a small woman. She finally decided she could take no more. She called up the realtors on May 27th, walked out of the house and was seen there no more. June the 19th, the movers arrived to take her belongings to the condo downtown. They noticed the smell when they walked in the building, but paid it no mind. They were men about town. Now, movers, you know, when they come to move you, all have a method that they like to use. They start with the furniture, follow with boxes, and end with the potted plants, livestock, and shoes. Well, the first thing to go, as I'm sure you've noticed, was the big heavy Chesterfield next to the door. One of the men saw the perfect papaya there by the baseboard. Perfect no more. He said, should we pack this? His partner said, certainly, all of the contents downtown by today. They put the remains in a plastic container, which they packed with the kitchen things, then drove away. Now it's September. Pamela and Kitty share a small room in a downtown hotel. It's not very pleasant, said Pamela sadly, but the only way I could get rid of the smell.
Nice.
All right.
Love
Thanks. Well, how are we doing?
Stuart's written something down here about the disappearing lakes on the west coast of Ireland. I don't have too big a story about this, but
Okay.
on the west coast of Ireland, there's actually a place called the Burren, and it's probably the closest thing I'll ever get, at least, to being on the surface of an alien planet. It looks like the moon. There's all these like rocks, and it's absolutely mental looking. But one of the things is these huge bodies of water that build up and seemingly disappear overnight, because that whole part of the west coast of Ireland is made of this really porous limestone, and bodies of water just disappear on a regular basis down through the cracks in these limestones, and these like seemingly small holes that can just disappear like vast quantities of water. But 1 year, there was a gentleman who was arrested down on the west coast of Ireland. And believe it or not, he was arrested because he had picked a flower. Now, the reason he was arrested for picking a flower is because the limestone is so porous down there that it was nearly impossible to grow anything down on the west coast of Ireland, especially in those patches. And what the old settlers on the west coast of Ireland used to do is they used to take bunches of soil and they used to stuff it into these ruts and these holes in the limestone. And out of some sheer like oddness and just I guess coincidence, all of a sudden these really rare flowers began to grow in these like man-made gardens that just consisted of handfuls of mud shoved into these small little runs and ruts. And these really rare flowers grew, and you can actually still to this day be fined and charged if you are to take these incredibly rare flowers out. And this one particular person someone had said something, and police actually took him aside. I don't think they ever did anything about it, but that's a little bit of the geographical background of the west coast of Ireland and how unusual a place it is in terms of that.
There we are. There's your question answered. Well, this has been lovely so far. I would like to ask if anyone's watching, if you know someone who is a storyteller or can be cornered or coerced into telling some stories, let us know. Let Tara know at the library, and we'll track them down and tell them you turned them in. Well, maybe not.
I'll tell you
mention
one more
too that-
story, Bill.
You got one more. Good boy.
Okay.
All right.
Years ago, they used to have buyers coming for lobsters, and they were mostly all from New Brunswick. They came down here in the summer, and they used their boats to anchor out, and they'd buy the lobsters from the fishermen, and then they'd take them usually to Big Bador Wharf or into Englishtown. But there used to be a pretty good supply of the spirits coming aboard the ship when they'd come to buy the lobsters. So some of the fishermen would get a bottle and have a few swigs out of it, and probably a few too many. And they had their boat always tied to the side of what the boat was called a smack that bought the lobsters. So he had the boat tied to the smack, and of course he got into the rum or whatever it was and had a few too many. And he happened to look in on the shore, and there was his wife in on the beach. But he didn't know what to do. So he got all worked up, and he feared he better straighten up and get her there pretty soon, or he's going to be in big trouble. So he took her on and put his two hands on the washboard and jumped. He was on the wrong side of the boat. The boat was on the other side. That's my last story.
Oh my.
Anyway.
Could go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll sign off with that.
Oh, yes. That was
Right.
excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll tell you that all of these, this will be number 5, and all of them are on the library website. If you go to cbrl.ca/New Moon Stories, they're there. And we, with all our imperfections, Wendy or Art and Kathy, this has been recorded, of course, and this will be New Moon 5, and hopefully we'll have it on soon. Tara, hey?
We'll chat. We'll figure it out. Yeah.
For sure. Anyway, it was nice being with you for the evening.
Well, thank you very much,
Yeah.
Charlie MacEachern from
Thanks for the
Tarbert and
invite.
Daniel up in North Shore, and Art and Kathy, the tag team. And Shirley, good to see you. Wendy, thanks for your contribution. Marilyn, I didn't see you, but I know you're there.
Night, everybody.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Charlie.
Bye, folks.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night now.
Bye.
Night all.
Good
Cheers.
night.
Till next time.
Until next time.
See you
Until
then.
next time.
Okay, I better shut this thing down or it'll be on all night.
Yeah, that's all. Good night.